afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
In the house today. Thank you for joining. This is the second part of our four-part webinar on this specific Madam Chair initiative that we've been running. I'm just going to do a quick 5-minute or so recap of what we did in our first webinar last month. And you'll recall that what we did, we quickly discussed what it was that you as members considered to be challenges and barriers and obstacles that you were facing or that you thought you would face as women on boards, and what would be the soft skills that you would like to enhance, or that you would like to gain the skills of to address those challenges and those barriers, and that these would be the key issues that we would focus on in the following 3 webinars in the series, and we would have speakers to address that. When I was going through that webinar of ours, it became apparent that there were about 12 key issues that came out of that webinar. A lot of them overlapped, but some of them were standalone. So it was quite an interesting discussion, and was quite important, the soft skills that we discussed and that were mentioned. Today, our speaker is going to be talking about some of the issues that came out in that first webinar, the very important issues of diversity and inclusion. And with me today, that we're also going to be joining me in a very interactive manner in today's webinar are 2 other members, also from the Madam Chair Committee, which is Amanda John and Seipati Mokhuoa. And when I say interactive, in the sense that Amanda is going to be introducing our speaker for us today, and Seipati is going to be dealing with the Q&A that we are going to be having afterwards. After our speaker has spoken, we're going to have a Q&A with her afterwards, and Seipati is going to be facilitating that. So without much further ado, I'm sure you're all quite excited to hear what our speaker has to say. So I'm going to hand over to Amanda to introduce our speaker for us. So over to you, Amanda.
Cool. Thank you so much, Trudie. And I'd also like to welcome everybody on the call today. Hope you guys will find it extremely insightful. So yeah, thank you so much, Sepati, for joining us this afternoon for a chat on diversity and inclusion. And yeah, so Sepati is the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer of HD Africa. And she has 15 years working experience mainly in financial services sector. She's generally a born strategist. And I think the more I read her bio, I was like, in my mind, I think that is what her being a born strategist has taken her to explore so many other things globally and not only nationally. So she's the founder and the CEO of the Southern African Women in Leadership, SAWIL, which was established in 2014. And it really focuses on women leadership and aspirant leaders. And with that being said, I think she's definitely the most ideal person to give us this talk today. And she has recently been appointed as the senator to represent South Africa in the Grand Assembly of the World Business Angels Investment. That is a mouthful, and I don't even think I've mentioned everything. But without further ado, I'd like to hand over to you, Seipati.
Oh, thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you. Greetings, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. A very special gratitude to Amanda and the Directors Association's Madam Chair initiative. I am delighted to be amongst women who are making a concerted effort to push the gender equality agenda forward. And I think it's safe to say that we can never have enough hands on deck. So well done, ladies, for the work that you do. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share in your space. Now, the state of affairs in corporate South Africa is simply egregious. And I think we all know that, right? So I don't have to bore you with statistics because the picture is quite clear, irrespective of where you're looking at it from. Those who do not want to see it for what it is are simply turning a blind eye. However, for the purpose of this conversation, I just want to set the tone, and maybe please allow me to share what I personally think is a very disturbing statistics with you, especially considering that we are in 2020. According to a report that was released by PricewaterhouseCoopers last year, only 3.31% of chief executives of JSE listed companies are women in the year 2019. This was in April. If one looks at the composition of leadership at JSE listed companies, the statistics paint a dim picture. Following Maria Ramos' retirement in February 2019, there were no female chief executives in the JSE top 40. However, we can safely say that it's encouraging to see the appointment of Mzwanele, who is simply a replacement. In as much as we are excited and we applaud her and we're happy for her, it really is not necessarily something to celebrate, because she's just basically replacing one woman who exited that top 40. So the very same report that I mentioned by PwC states that 10.2% of all chief executives in companies listed on the JSE are Black Africans. I think I'm gonna let that sink in. 10%, the entire JSE blacklisted companies, only 10% are Black Africans, 1.7% of chief executives are colored, 2.2 are Indian or Asian, and a whopping 84.9%, obviously white male. So, or white, let me put it that way. I'm not here to take away from the strides that some of you sitting here are making in terms of climbing the corporate ladder and shattering glass ceilings. However, we need to be, I feel like it's time we be frank and honest about the reality of our country where diversity and inclusion is concerned. And I shared a post yesterday on Twitter that quite frankly, I'm tired of talking. And I always refer back to the 1956 women who marched, who actually took action in order for them to gain momentum in things that mattered to them at that time. And that's allowing us to have a seat at the table today, or even to aspire to want to have one. So how is it that 26 years post-apartheid, we still have less than 20% representation in terms of diversity in decision-making roles concerning the country's economy? In a country where the majority is Black, I think you will agree with me that by now, if corporate South Africa wanted, they would have prioritized fair representation of the country's demographics in executive boardrooms. Of course, there was a time when this particular mandate was construed as a mere balancing act of the status quo through quotas, EE and AA appointments by the powers that be. But unfortunately, in this day and age, global research suggests that companies that prioritize diversity and inclusion in all aspects tend to do better. They are more profitable and are in most cases the employer of choice where talent is concerned. So diversity and inclusion is no longer a nice to have. It is a business imperative. And I see that we have some brothers in here, so I prepared this for the ladies. But so ladies and gentlemen, my sisters and brothers, I want to assure you, or at least let you know today, that when you get that seat at the table, it's not a favor. You are officially in demand, not only as talent, but as a valued customer as well. Let me share an interesting experience that used to baffle me when I was still employed a couple of years ago. Okay, maybe two and a half years ago. It feels like a long time. I worked for a big insurance company firm here in South Africa, and I was part of the senior management team and mostly responsible for the rural region, which is your Northwest Limpopo and Mpumalanga. And at the time, we had a mandate as part of the organization's larger business strategy. and focus, and that was to relentlessly acquire the Black middle class market. That is, according to our scorecards, Black professionals earning between 20 and 80,000, right? This was in the CEO scorecard, it was in the MD scorecard, it was in my scorecard, and it was in my direct reports scorecard and their direct reports scorecard. So it was a business imperative. Did I mention that at that time, I was the first Black person ever to take up that leadership position in those particular areas, which is shocking because that's not a CEO position, that's not an MD position, it's not even an executive GM position. But to think that at that time you could still have a black person, not even a Black woman, being the first to occupy that role, it tells you how the business or how corporate is just not intentional about prioritizing diversity and inclusion. Now, at the time, I didn't think much of it, of course, but in retrospect now, when I look back, I realized that actually my appointment was more of a strategic move than anything else. Large organizations, such as this one that I worked for, they don't just decide on the spot that now suddenly we need a Black person or we need Black customers. My humble opinion is that I was a strategic hire and not a diversity hire, as some would have liked to believe. Not just another EE or AA number, but part of the larger human capital resource that the company knew they needed in order to move forward, or at least to realize their strategic plan, right? Of acquiring the BMI customer, BMI meaning Black middle income customer. So I think that it's fair to say that they needed a Black middle income appointment, BMI appointment, to execute that particular strategy. Hence, only in 2015 and 17, there was a need for a Black person to go and lead in those areas. I did, of course, meet the scorecard and in most cases exceeded. So when I say we are in demand, I mean it. And I think that's the mindset that, first of all, as women who get these positions or opportunities, that we need to maybe be comfortable with. That because you get into these spaces and you're told you're just an EE or AA hire or what you call a diversity hire. It's important to know that that is definitely not the truth. You are there for a reason. We are in an age of disruption, and I believe there's a generation of disruptors rising to the occasion at an alarming rate. These are mostly young people across the world who are shaping what we call the gig economy. And they're rendering companies and organizations powerless in terms of strict working hours, ownership of manpower and talent. For Africa, I strongly believe that women and youth are the answer the continent has been waiting for. We are entrepreneurial by nature, we are intuitive, naturals, born leaders, and perseverance is at the core of our being. I don't know a Black person who doesn't know how to persevere. But how do we position ourselves to be at the forefront of shaping a new status quo, right? How do we ensure that we lead the disruption conversations in our workplace? I think there's no time for us to be bystanders anymore. Hence, I kept referring to the 1956 women, that these conversations are pointless if we're just going to keep on gathering and having conversations. I feel that the era of being consumers and consuming products and services we have no say in stops with us, or at least it has to stop with us. If we don't have a say in how something was manufactured or are not part of the manufacturing process, or we have no business, then we have no business consuming it. We need to start sending a very strong message, particularly to corporate and business, that our hard-earned money matters. If we are not part of the decision-making process, we are not spending our money on your products or services. It's as simple as that. And I feel like this is the modern 1956 match that we need to maybe consider putting in place. We need to normalize penalizing companies for not prioritizing transformation. Of course, there are rules and there are systems in place and there are policies, and I know that there are penalties that you have to pay if you don't meet your quotas and whatever. That hasn't worked. So what most companies have done very well is to prioritize diversity and inclusion at entry-level positions, at mid-management or somewhat senior management, but decision-making roles are still locked and the glass ceiling only has a few cracks here and there. I believe it is our job today to shatter it. We cannot be excited with so-and-so has been appointed as I don't know, a senior head of what, or an MD of whatever. It's good, it's progress, but there are more people who are capable to actually assume those roles and positions, and to bring that 20% at the JSE level to a fair 50%. Our country has more than enough equipped, educated, talented people who can actually do the job. But I think it will take more than just a conversation for us to get there. So as women on boards, we need to be at the forefront of creating women-empowered workplaces where we pride ourselves with lifting as we rise. So there's this typical notion that as a woman, when you get into these spaces, and most of us, we are alone in there, and we're quite happy to be alone. We shut the door behind us and we gloat about being the only woman. Initially, it's like the first Black woman, and then we gloat about being the only woman. That has to stop. So we really need to pride ourselves in creating women-empowered workplaces where equality, diversity, and inclusion are not mere conversations in boardrooms full of white males, a few men of color, and a woman here and there. We need to start putting our money where our mouth is. If it means being intentional about where you bank, where you buy your car, your house, which medical aid you use, which insurance company you're with, where you buy your phone, gadgets, clothes, food, whatever, which schools you take your children to, then so be it. But we need to stop supporting businesses that do not care to have a diverse representation of the country's demographics. So next time, I think we've had a lot of this. We had one recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, where companies will trend for offending customers such as ourselves of a different race, or a customer with from a different religion background, gender, sexual orientation, age, socioeconomic status, or even physical disability. But then it's a trend and then it dies down and then everybody moves on. Or at least you have people retweeting or tweeting saying that so-and-so must fall, I've canceled my contract, or I've canceled my policy, or whatever, and then it ends there. I think that once you have a seat at the table, it really is your responsibility to actively speak out and hold these companies accountable. So let it not be a hashtag that dies down and then it's business as usual. Table it as part of your agenda, or of the board agenda, if you must. Have robust conversations about it with your board colleagues, and vouch not to be found in the same position as that other company. Let it be understood that your voice brings value. That's, for me, in terms of diversity and inclusion, that's my piece. That's my small piece that I have to share with you. But I want us to actually have a conversation, because the briefing from Amanda was that it's more of a conversational thing. That's my thinking. Those are the kind of things that goes on in my mind, that in terms of action, if we are earning from these companies, isn't it time that maybe then we took our monies to where it will be more appreciated than to a company where we're constantly being offended for being who we are? So in conclusion, to my thoughts, before we get into the actual conversation, is that diversity and inclusion directly translated means a seat at the table. So you need to make it count. If you get that seat at the table, make it count. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that is part and parcel of sitting on some of these boards. Don't be afraid to speak up. You know, it's not easy, because I know a lot of people. We have a lot of conversations with some of my friends about these things, that you speak up, then you are out of the door the next day. They find a way to get rid of you. But I think we need to learn to use our voices even in the face of justice or anything that we do not agree with. You might be a minority in those spaces, but you need to know that you are there to represent the majority, and that comes with a certain level of responsibility. So I'm open to have a conversation, a robust conversation, or just even an easy conversation about the things that I've put on the table. What are your thoughts? What do you think as women on boards, or as women who aspire to sit on boards? How do you think we can action some of these things and move forward? I will give it back to you, Amanda, to open up for the conversation so that we can, I don't know if people want to talk.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Seipati. I'll hand over to Sbahle because she's actually going to be managing the conversation between all the members attending today and yourself, whether it's verbally or it's via the written chat box. Over to you, Sibi.
Hi. Okay. Thank you so much, Amanda. I hope you can hear me. I'm actually logged on two phones. I just want to quickly switch off one. Thank you so much, Seipati, for that, and thank you also for engaging on trying to make this a conversation. This is open now to everybody, and I'm assuming that everybody kind of knows.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I thought it was me.
No, it's this side. I think it's the gate on the phone.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, cool. So if you want to just engage team, please can you just raise your hand and use that functionality so that we can take your question or we can take your comments regarding what Seipati just shared with us. Okay, I have Boniswa, who's just raised a hand. There was also Mpho who had raised.
Jesus.
Are you taking us there, Seipati? Are you driving us to the top?
Which top? Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay.
I had the speaker connected to the phone, so I just realized that. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. All right. So Boniswa, do you have a comment that you want to share with Seipati and the rest of us, or are you just?
I was
typing?
just hi. I was just typing. Hi guys. Hi Sepati. My comment was about basically what is the critical mass at board level that will ensure that the females that are there or the women that are there or the diverse groups that are there have the impact desired. Also, that your comment about the organizations or the companies that we're shifting to, that the rise of the conscious consumer is assisting in shifting perception in terms of where we're going to put our money. But if we are not, I'm going to call it leveling I'm going to call it knowledge sharing, transforming how I'm going to call it consume, that is still going to take a bit of time.
Of course.
Just a comment on the criticalness. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's not something that we can achieve over a few months or a year. I mean, even at SAWIL, we launched at the beginning of this year what we call SAWIL Vision 2030. So based on research, in order for us to effectively change or even touch the surface of corporate South Africa in terms of the JSE listed companies, 10 years is the bare minimum, just as a start. So it's a long-term game, but we need to start conscientizing ourselves for that approach, that it cannot be a conversation and business as usual. We need to get to a point where we actually, engage them robustly and or sort of touch them where it hurts the most, if I can put it that way.
Thanks, Seipati. Paul, if you're still interested in sharing your comment, please can you just drop a chat and then I'll see, or raise your hand again. But now I'm going to take Chire, who's raised their hand. Please can you unmute and share with us?
Thank you so much for the platform. I just need, I want to raise a question to Seipati. I attended a session where there was one woman CEO. She's very passionate about transformation, and her she shared, and her advice was for women to volunteer to sit on the board to gain experience. And at that time I was engaging one lady who's sitting in another board, and I reached to her and I said, I'm interested just to come observe for experiential purposes. And she's like, you know, the board is like just any other structure, formalized structure. You need to apply, and unfortunately they cannot just allow you to come sit in as somebody who's observing. And this is something I'm noticing even on LinkedIn with inexperienced graduates, some of whom are very desperate for opportunities just to graduate. And I'm thinking, how do we go about this and blocking this path and shattering the ceiling, as Seipati just put it, to make sure that we open doors for people who are hungry enough and really want to get inside to make a dent to this segregation. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, that's a that's a tough question. I would like the answer to that question myself. I still haven't found the answer. But one of the things that I've realized about some of these things is, especially leadership, you know, it's strange and unfortunate that even to be in a leadership position, you're not tested on, how can I put it, your passion to lift others as you rise. You know, you can be a leader just simply by being talented, educated, and whatever. So it's not all of us who get into these spaces who are really keen on opening the door for others. So I think just because one person said no, it doesn't mean that it's no, you know, from everybody. So maybe knock on other doors as well, because there are women out there and there are men out there who are always more than prepared to welcome us and mentor and open these doors for us.
Thank you.
I think that answers your question.
So Bashle, if I can also just add in a little add-on to that from the Directors Association. That is also actively something that the Directors Association is also to achieve, where that is one of the aims. So all the members that are going through the Directors Association's programs, you don't come through the end of it without having first been placed on a board as a volunteer, where you do exactly that, as you've said, where you sit there and you just observe and you witness and you get to experience without actually being involved at board. So you get to gain that sort of vicarious experience, so to speak, and that's what we're trying to achieve, exactly that, where you get to have all the training of what it means to be on a board, and then we also place you on sort of volunteer board, so to speak, with the partnership of companies that are prepared to do that for us. And we do have companies that are prepared to do that. So that is something that we've identified, and that is something where we see exactly, as you say, a need for that, because for a lot of people, it is daunting before you get placed on a board, where you imagine to yourself, well, what is it going to be like? Well, how am I going to fit in? What am I going to say for the first meeting? And just having that volunteer experience where you've been to a few meetings of actual board meetings, where you're just sitting in the background, witnessing what's going on and how these meetings unfold, make a world of difference to you for when you actually are placed on your first board. So yes, that is something that we've addressed, and that is something that we do as the Directors Association.
Yeah, and there are also board academy programs offered by different institutions. I know that Gibbs does have one. We are also at SAWIL currently in negotiations with the European Board Academy to bring, but that one focuses more on women who actually want to go global, to bring, you know, board training for such. So I guess the easiest route is to actually get yourself some board training and then look for somebody who's willing to mentor and open the doors for you.
I'd like to share something quick on that. I think just to your point, Sepati, around also you look for somebody who's willing to mentor you. I think sometimes, whether it's due to lack of experience or almost feeling like that's not the space that you sit in, therefore you can't sit in that space right now. I think it is so important to put yourself out there. I do think a lot of women don't have experience being on boards, obviously, looking at all the stats that you shared with us earlier. And sometimes, if the election or the selection or the nomination does not come to you, you actually have to do the work to kind of like get yourself there. So I think that's definitely one of the things that I'd like to encourage the ladies to do. Google is our best friend, man. There's so many companies out there. Sometimes it might not come via the Directors Association or SAWIL or the Global European Board, or whatever the case may be. But sometimes if you also take it upon yourself to say, well, this is kind of where I'm trying to get to, why not contact any company that you want and actually find out how they operate in that particular space? Because we might not get all the information with companies that are looking for such things, and you might just spot it. So I think that's definitely some feedback from my side.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Amy. Seipati, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think as women, we have so many challenges, and some of these challenges, unfortunately, they come from us women ourselves, which is, I don't know when and how we're ever going to overcome this. We also have now, there's this term called the golden skirt syndrome. I don't know if you guys know about it, but where you find one woman sitting on multiple boards, and they're not even mentoring, one person or basically taking in people or taking people up as they go along. So I don't see the need to sit on 7 boards when I can say, Amanda, you take this one, or Trudie, you take that one. So I think that's some of the things that we really need to think about, that you don't have to be the one person shining alone in this. We can't change the landscape if we keep doing that. That's just a thought.
That's very true, Seipati. And I think, to your point, I would like to encourage the ladies. I'm quite sure that due to the number of 93 attendees today, that is absolutely awesome. And there's definitely no way that all of them have gone through, whether it's via the Directors Association or whatever other institution it is, some board member, director kind of a program. And you guys can definitely follow us on LinkedIn or any other social media platforms. You can contact the Directors Association directly, find out more about the program. And I think to that point that you were talking about now with regards to sharing the opportunities, we've even got within ourselves, as the ladies in the different groups, WhatsApp groups, where I might spot an opportunity and I'm like, oh, wow. I always say to people, I'm not into the accounting space of things. If ever they're looking for a board member with that experience, cut me out. I'm willing to share with other people. And that's exactly what happens in such platforms, even as this one that we're on now, to say, well, join a WhatsApp group or whatever the case may be. And there may be opportunities that may be of interest to you, because not all of them are ideal for everybody else.
Yeah. Thanks, Amanda. I don't know if you've got anything else to add, Seipati. I see Sia has had his or her hands for a number of time now. Sia, do you want to just comment as well?
Yes, it's her hand. Thanks, everyone. I've got a question for basically all of the panelists and for anyone here who might be able to answer this as well. So Seipati earlier on mentioned how the landscape of the world of work is slightly changing due to the gig economy. So I wanted to see what everybody else's opinions with regards to how the landscape of serving on a board would change as the gig economy becomes to rise. And sort of like as a part 2 to that question, particularly as we're seeing so many of us, particularly here in South Africa, starting our own businesses, trying to get, sort of an income in as a result of the ravages of COVID-19. How receptive do you think people will be for doing the extra work to, build up the capacity for serving on boards or having people serve on their boards post COVID-19 and during this sort of phase where we're wanting to start something, but it's not quite coming together. I hope that was clear.
Okay. I'm gonna attempt that one. So the thing with the gig economy is that, especially if you look at the millennials and going down, you know, the Gen Zs and those who are coming up, they are more aware and fearless. Whereas with us, we were brought up with get an education, get a job, and it's almost like we're constantly at the mercy of corporate South Africa. That is why even when we get into these positions, we, you know, over and above the imposter syndrome, there's doubt. So the moment the person says to you, an EE appointment, you genuinely believe that. And the first thing that you start looking for is, let me get experience and exit and do my own thing. And I think companies are becoming more and more aware of the fact that the talent, you know, worldwide, not just in South Africa, people who are actually talented, who are educated, who are capable, realizing their value, and therefore they're taking it elsewhere. If you look at the gig economy, for example, there are people who are setting up, we are one of them with the HD Africa, setting up platforms where people who, so let's say you're in IT, and you're very good with whatever it is that you do, it's easy for you to get onto that platform and acquire contracts from various people and work from wherever you are. So now you don't have to worry yourself about chasing board positions and going from there to there. And that's the point that I was trying to make, that with that realization, companies will start to value talent more. In fact, they have already started, because they do need us. So for those who want to pursue board positions, maybe then just have that at the back of your mind, that their opportunities are opening up instead of closing, if I can put it that way, because of the gig economy.
I just want to also add, with regards to the gig economy from the perspective of the DA, is that again, how boards have been normally formed was that it was very people who've climbed up the corporate ladder, and then they get appointed into boards. So what the DA is trying to do with one of their strategies is to actually diversify that, is to say there's many other people who are capable of running and managing boards, who have not necessarily gone through that route. I'm going to ask. There's somebody who's not muted. I just can't see who it
is. It's the Huawei P30 Lite.
Yeah, it's the P30 Lite. Yeah, it's muted. You can continue, Sibi. Sibi, now you are muted.
Let me unmute. There we go. So I was saying that that part of the strategy is to try and build a diversified board where people are not necessarily coming through that corporate ladder type of lineage, which is how boards were built. It's about looking at how do we really diversify thought, and not just from a perspective of women, but from a perspective of what do people have experience in and what is relevant, because the economy and how the markets are changing as well, within how businesses are working. You need people who have not necessarily just sit in corporate to try and take part in boards as well. So hopefully within the gig economy, we'll see that grow a little bit more as well in diversity of thought. Okay, that was my addition. I just want to see who else is.
Mzwanele had his hand for quite some time.
Yes, I do think he might have posted the question already, but can feel free to say something. But it basically said, what is your agenda, Seipati, on the boards?
So it's very interesting. I was actually anticipating this question. I don't sit on boards at all. And the past 2 years, it was a deliberate move when I left corporate South Africa, because I wanted to focus on empowering and enabling women to sit on boards. So, you know, it's a tricky thing. Corporate South Africa is very tricky, or a job is tricky, because you sit there, you basically have to watch what you say and how you approach things. So in order for SAWIL to achieve its mandate, I don't have the luxury of being tied down by rules and regulations of a particular company. So I don't sit on boards, except the global initiatives that I'm busy with, that they can't tell me what to say, when to say it, how to say it. If I can be blunt.
That's a luxury.
Thanks, Seipati. Does anybody else?
That answers your question.
I think Seipati, you've answered the fact that you don't sit on boards. But if you were to actually
muted,
he has a follow-up question.
Okay.
Yeah, he's muted. Mzwanele, you still muted?
Unmute yourself.
Yeah, he's still, Mzwanele, you still muted.
Okay,
there you
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, firstly, let me just thank all of you for inviting me here. I really tried to be disciplined and listen very attentively to see what is being said here. I think it's very good things that are being said here. But you know, I'm generally known to be brutally honest. So that's what I'm going to do with you today. I'm going to be brutally honest. Yeah, you know, this discussion that is happening today reminds me of the discussions that we've had, I think in the 80s, as it were. And I think I must be part of those that must be blamed for not helping to take the course forward. And I'm worried that this discussion here is going to repeat the mistakes that we as men have made, having been in those positions that you're talking about here today. And the reason I've asked this question as to what is your agenda on the board. Well, I hear now that you don't serve on the board and so on, but the question still applies to say, the women that want to put on those boards, what agenda is it that they should be driving? And I think this is the issue. The issue is that, you know, I'm saying, you know, in our times in the BMF, we've been pushing this thing of a transformation. And in fact, I'm arguing these days that actually we use the word transformation when in fact, I think what was really meant is diversity and inclusion, as it were. And I have a problem with diversity and inclusion for the sake of it, without an agenda. Because basically what this means is that we're trying to get a multi-racial, a multi-gender boards and executive or what have you. But you are not changing the system. So all you are changing are people that play in this system. This is my problem. In the past, we worried about Black people and all that. We did get Black managers. But in fact, what we have today is the reason we're having this problem today is because those Black managers, I'm including myself, those Black executives that were there today and that were there then and even today, all they are doing is they've allowed themselves to be, shall I call it, sucked into the culture of that organization. So actually there's no transformation here. So all we have is that instead of a white CEO, we've got a Black CEO, but that Black CEO is pushing, in fact, that white agenda even much more seriously than a white person. That's what we have. So what we have, you have Black people that are trying to outcompete white people in whiteness. That's what we have. So I have a problem with people that get into these positions without an agenda. I have a problem with people that are there to perpetuate the status quo. This is my problem. So, and I'm arguing that the BMF of today can't do that. The BMF of yesterday asked, that's what we tried to do, and we call that transformation, which is not transformation. And I would not want to sit here as an elder. All of you are younger than me here. Those that I have seen here, all the women that I've seen here are younger than me. So I'm addressing you. I know Mteto is here, but I'm addressing the young women that are here, that please don't repeat the same mistakes that we've made. Our preoccupation was to be there and so on, but there was not enough that we have done as men to transform and change the system so that this discussion of today doesn't happen. Had we done that then, it would be normal to have women on boards. It would be normal to have young people on board. But those that were there like us didn't change the system. But I'm not hearing you here today fighting to change the system. I'm hearing you today to be wanting to be part of this exclusionary system. You just want to be there as well. First on this or second or third or whatever, but you just want to be there, just want to be included. I have a problem with being included. I want people that want to be there with an agenda to transform this thing so that it changes, a complete overhaul. That's what we should be trying to get to. That's my point.
Wow, thanks, Mzwanele. I don't know, Sepati, if you have any comment, but I mean, I think from my perspective, it would be interesting to understand, do we know what the system is? Are we really spending enough time to understand what is the system? Because you would need to understand what that is for you to have an agenda to address it. But I don't know, Sepati, if you've got any comment there?
Yeah, so I appreciate Mzwanele's sentiments, and in fact, that is exactly where I was coming from, but maybe he's more bold in terms of his honesty. Maybe I'm still tiptoeing because typically what they did as well, you know, if you have a career ahead of you, you mind what you say, and that is really one of the biggest challenges for us as Black professionals and leaders, because like I said, you get into these spaces and you have to worry about your children. You have to worry about your income before you open your mouth. And in my opening, that's why I said, once you are there, understand that you are there for a reason. If you have to speak up against some of these injustices, not even if you have to, learn and be okay with speaking up and challenge the status quo from inside out. It's easy to talk from outside, I know, but if you're going to sit on a board position, don't just be another flower on that table. Really occupy a seat at the table and make it be clear and understood that you are there with an agenda to diversify, to actually extend the table for more people like yourself to come in, and in order for you to serve the larger demographic of the country. Because I mean, if we make an example, like was it Superba List or whatever that was trending the other day, we have so many people, young people on Twitter, you know how Black Twitter goes, where something like that happens, then immediately people go to check on the executive of that particular company. Outsurance has suffered the same fate, and many other companies, I think my way as well. We rave about it on Twitter and then that's it. But you can't tell me that there aren't Black people in those companies, even if it's at senior management level. When you have those meetings, make sure that it does go up. Make sure that the people at the top who are not us also get a clear picture and understanding of what the consumer is saying out there, that if it doesn't change, the company will suffer. And vice versa, the consumer, if we're raving and ranting about these things, we need to actually mean it. If we're saying, I'm canceling my policy, cancel your policy. So hurt them where it hurts the most. I think it's a collaboration effort between those people who are in there and those people on the receiving end. And until we really fully push that as an agenda, it'll continue to be business as usual. It'll continue to be Seipati gets a position and then we're all excited and we celebrate and then that's it. One person here on my phone, because I've got other people on this side, is saying that in most companies, Black women are out in these positions as fronting, and some of them don't have a voice in those positions. It's a very sad reality that you can be a COO in a company but not have a voice. It's actually, for me, it's not just a sad reality. It's disappointing, it's demoralizing. So we really need, we really need to shift our mindsets and truly be bold and fearless about some of our approaches. And that can only happen if we understand why we are there in the first place. Let's stop feeling sorry about ourselves and thinking that we are EE and AA appointments. That time has come and gone. Globally, people need young people on boards. People need diverse people on boards or in a company in order for the company to address the larger demographic of where they are operating. So you are in as much a need to them as you feel that you desperately need your income.
Thanks, Seipati. I'm just taking note of time. We're going to take 2 more questions from Trudie and Ntabi, and then we're going to be sort of closing with the questions. So Trudie, please, can you ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Siba. I think it's 2 things. One, partly in response to what Sepati just responded to now, but which also, segues into my question. And I think the first part relates to agendas on a board, which I think is quite a nuanced thing, because you must remember that when you are a board member, whether you are executive or non-executive, you have fiduciary obligations. So whether you go in with an agenda or not, you have fiduciary obligations. So depending on the nature of that company, as a director, your first and foremost obligations are to the company. So if that company, be it a JSC listed company or a private company, be it a packaging company or a transport company, or a company that sells, sweets of whatever nature, whatever the nature of the business of the company is, as a director, be it non-executive or executive, your first and foremost obligations when you sit down at that boardroom table are to the company. It is not to your agenda. How your agenda might come forth, and this is me speaking as the lawyer that I am, how your agenda might come forth and play out is when you have an opportunity to do that. So, for example, when as the board sits and it considers tenders that it is putting out, or procurement, or engaging people, or taking on service providers, and particularly probably we're taking on service providers, that's when agenda can come in. That's where you can advance transformation. That's where you can advance gender diversity. That's where you can make a difference. Where there's vacancies on the board, that's where you can advance transformation. That's where you, particularly as a woman, can advance gender diversity. But when you are sitting as a board member, be it an executive director or non-executive director, your first and foremost obligations are to that company. It is not to your personal agenda. It is not to the shareholder. It is not to any one particular stakeholder. It is first and foremost to that entity that is the company. Which then segues into my query, my discussion, which I wanted to just raise with Seipati. So there's a famous saying that goes, and I forget the name of the woman, it's an African-American woman who made the comment about, if they won't give me a place at the table, I will bring my chair. And about 2 weeks ago, I was watching a podcast about a discussion by a group of African-American leaders in the States. And one of them was a guy by the name of Black Mike, who's quite well known, and T.I., the rapper, and a few other people. But the 2 of them stuck out the most for me, because what T.I. said was that he says, I don't want a chair at the table. I don't want a space at the table. I want the whole table. So that's kind of his view on diversity, which if one takes into account the demographics of the country as it stands, then technically speaking, we should really have companies, be them JSC listed or private companies, that have boards that are completely Black. And when I say Black, I'm using the BEE terminology. So Black consisting of African, Indian, colored. And we should have boards that are completely women. And it should not be something that should be, wowed at. It should be something that is the norm if one takes into account our demographics. So when I heard him say that I'm not bringing my own chair to the table, I want the whole table, I thought, well, yes, Akunka. What do you
Thanks.
think?
Thanks, Trudie. What do you think, Seipati?
No, I totally agree with you. But I think it also speaks to what I said earlier, that for me, sitting on boards, it's actually tricky right now. So I figured, let me have my own table so that I can, you know, to a certain degree, control the boards from my space. And it's working. So yeah, I agree with you.
Thanks, thanks, Seipati. And Tabi, Amy, I do see your hand, but let's just quickly take Tabi.
Hi, everyone. So it's actually a comment more than anything, to say that I think the driving force behind the agenda of why you should, or rather a woman should join a board. First, you need to know why you want to be in a board, you know, so as to avoid that the suction of being sucked into the culture and system of that company or board that you'll be serving. And also, I also think that you need to be very intentional about which board you want to serve in. So it should not just be, I just want to be the board for the sake of being in a board. You should be very intentional about why you want to serve in a board and which board you want to serve in, which then brings about that transformation, because then now you are very intentional with your membership in that board. Mm-hmm. That's my comment.
Thanks, thanks, Ntabi. I don't think it was a question for Seipati. So unless Seipati, you want to say something, but otherwise, Amy, you can ask your question or your comment.
No, there was nothing my side. If I did raise my hand, I was probably clapping. It was probably the clapping hands, not the raised hands.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nandi, then we've got I'm going to take Nandi as the last one, and then we're going to have to close the session. Nandi, do you have anything you want to say?
Yes, thank you. And apologies, I was late. Okay, I just wanted to go, you know, when Trudie was speaking, I don't sit in any board at the moment, so I'm still new, but I'm just thinking, board level is where you do strategic thinking. So yes, there is a fiduciary duty for you to, you know, to serve the company, but that's where you have a voice to change the way the company, or, you know, probably how the company is operating in a certain community. So for me, when Mzwanele spoke about having an agenda, it clicks something to me to say, I mustn't just go there and end up just being operational, doing what everyone else was doing. If I know why I'm there, and me personally being a Black woman, at least I'm able to introduce new things that the other people in the board maybe are not exposed to. I don't know, it's just my thinking.
Seipati, do you want to add something there?
Yeah, look, she has a point, and it's exactly what we've been saying, that it doesn't help to sit on these boards and be voiceless. And again, emphasis on you need to really be confident and believe that you are there for a reason. You are there to add value. So the value that you are adding, is it just mainly focused on the company? Because if that is the case, then it's pointless. And like Mzwanele said, then you end up just being just like the rest of them that's been there, like you just a Black version of the white people that have been on that board. So you have to have an agenda, and you have to be clear about that agenda. Obviously how you push it, there are ways of doing these things, but you can't just sit there and like somebody's doing you a favor. I don't agree with that at all. With being on board and just being part of the furniture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to close the Q&A session, and I'm going to just ask Trudie to close out for us as we just come to 1:30. Trudie, do you want to close out for us?
Thanks, Seba. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. This, as you recall from last month, this was our first session where we actually have a speaker addressing the soft skills that we discussed and engaged with you last month that you wanted to see addressed. And the skills we discussed today were diversity and inclusion, which were two issues that were specifically raised by you last month. And next month we'll have another speaker to address some of the other issues that were raised. And we hope that you will join us for our session next month. But remember also that next week, Tuesday at the same time, one of the other committees from the Directors Association will also be having a webinar and tackling some other topics for you. So thank you so much for joining us. And Seipati, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it because we know at this point in time you are under a lot of pressure and you've got time constraints to spend with us, and our members is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much. And thank you members and non-members for joining us today. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And please, when you have the next sessions, do invite me. I'd love to join. I really enjoyed being part of this conversation. So thank you.
We absolutely will. Thanks, Seipati.
Awesome.